I'm Ray Dalio. I've managed over $160 billion in assets. I predicted the 2008 financial crisis years before it happened, while everyone else was saying the economy had never been stronger. I've spent the last 40 years studying every major economic collapse for the last 500 years. The Weimar hyperinflation, the Great Depression, the Japanese asset bubble, the 2008 global financial crisis, different countries, different decades, different technologies, but the same pattern, the same cycle, the same human stupidity repeating itself over and over. And I'm about to tell you something that's going to make you very uncomfortable, something that will change how you see money, debt, your job, your investments, and the economy forever. You don't understand how money works. I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it literally, factually, and mechanically. Most people, and I'm talking about very smart people, people with PhDs in economics, people running Fortune 500 companies, people making policy decisions that affect millions of lives, they don't actually understand the economic machine. They think they do. They use impressive terminology. They talk about quantitative easing, fiscal stimulus, monetary policy, GDP growth, inflation targeting. But they're just repeating words they heard on CNBC or read in the Wall Street Journal. They don't understand the underlying mechanism. They don't understand the machine. And because people don't understand how the economy actually works, they make the same catastrophic mistakes over and over again. 1929, the Great Depression that lasted a decade and led to World War II. 1909, Japan's asset bubble collapsed that created a lost decade they still haven't fully recovered from. 2008, the global financial crisis that wiped out $16 trillion in wealth and threw millions of people out of work. Different days, different countries, different asset classes, same pattern, same stupidity. You think the economy is this massive, incomprehensibly complex, chaotic system. Billions of transactions happening every day, millions of people making trillions of decisions about what to buy, what to sell, whether to save or spend, stock markets bouncing up and down for mysterious reasons that nobody can predict, recessions appearing out of nowhere like earthquakes or hurricanes, natural disasters that strike without warning. That's what you've been told. That's what they want you to believe. Because if you believe the economy is too complex to understand, you'll never question the people making decisions. You'll never challenge the experts. You'll just accept whatever happens and blame it on bad luck or forces beyond anyone's control. Wrong. Completely, fundamentally, dangerously wrong. The economy is not chaotic. It's not random. It's not unpredictable. The economy works exactly like a machine. And I'm not being poetic or metaphorical. I mean, it works with the mechanical precision and predictability of an engine in a car. There are parts, there are gears, there are inputs and outputs, there are cycles that repeat with clockwork regularity. And if you understand the parts, if you understand how they interact, you can predict the cycles years in advance. Think about your car engine for a moment. It seems complex if you've never looked under the hood. Hundreds of parts moving at thousands of RPMs. But if you understand the basic principle, fuel and air mix, spark ignites it, explosion pushes piston, piston turns crankshaft, crankshaft turns wheels, suddenly it makes sense. You can predict what will happen. You know that if you run out of fuel, the engine stops. You know that if you block the air intake, it won't start. Cause and effect, mechanical, predictable. The economy is the same way. Most people look at economic crashes and say, nobody could have seen that coming. It was a black swan event, an unpredictable catastrophe. That's a lie that incompetent policymakers tell to cover up their failures. I saw 2008 coming years in advance, not because I have a crystal ball, not because I'm smarter than everyone else, but because I understood the machine. I understood the debt cycle. I could see the gears turning, I could see the pressure building, and I knew exactly what was going to happen. In 2006, while real estate agents were telling people house prices would go up forever, while investment banks were packaging toxic mortgages and selling them as AAA-rated securities, while the Federal Reserve Chairman was saying subprime mortgages were contained and posed no systemic risk, I was telling anyone who would listen that we were heading for the biggest financial crisis since the Great Depression. People thought I was crazy. They thought I was being pessimistic. They thought I didn't understand the new paradigm of modern finance. But I wasn't predicting the future. I was just reading the machine. And right now, in 2026, we're at a very specific, very dangerous point in that cycle. The exact same point we were at in 1929, right before the Great Depression. The exact same point Japan was at in 1989, right before their asset bubble exploded. The exact same point the world was at in 2008. If you don't understand where we are in the cycle, you're about to learn a very expensive lesson. You're about to watch your savings evaporate, your investments collapse, your job disappear, and you'll have no idea why it's happening. Let me show you how the economic machine actually works. Strip away all the complexity, all the jargon, all the noise, and you're left with something beautifully simple. The economy is made up of three main forces, three gears that drive everything you see. First, productivity growth. This is the only thing that actually makes us richer in the long run. Productivity growth is simple. Over time, humans learn, we innovate, we figure out better ways to do things, we become more productive. A farmer in the year 1800 could feed maybe 5 people, working from sunrise to sunset, 6 days a week, using hand tools and animal labor. A farmer today using GPS-guided tractors, genetically optimized seeds, and precision agriculture can feed over 150 people while working 40 hours a week. That's productivity growth. That farmer isn't working harder, he's working smarter. He's producing more output with the same input. And over decades and centuries, that compounds into dramatically higher living standards. This is the real source of wealth. Not money, not credit, not gold or Bitcoin or real estate, productivity. The ability to produce goods and services that people actually want. Productivity growth is slow. It's steady. It averages about 2% per year in developed economies. That doesn't sound exciting. It doesn't make headlines. You can't get rich quick from 2% annual productivity growth. But here's what most people miss. Productivity growth is the only sustainable source of wealth. Everything else, all the booms and bubbles and get-rich-quick schemes, they're just redistributing existing wealth from one person to another. Productivity growth actually creates new wealth. Second, the short-term debt cycle. Now we get to debt. And this is where things get interesting because debt is what creates all the drama, all the booms and busts, all the cycles that make the economy seem unpredictable. The short-term debt cycle lasts 5 to 8 years. Here's exactly how it works step by step. When the economy is doing well, people feel confident, they have jobs, their incomes are rising, asset prices are going up, so they borrow money, they take out mortgages to buy houses, they use credit cards to buy cars and TVs and vacations. Businesses borrow to expand. That borrowing increases spending. You borrow $50,000 to buy a car. The car dealer now has $50,000 more income. He uses that income to buy inventory, pay his employees, maybe take a vacation himself. Those people now have more income. They spend more. Their spending becomes someone else's income. It's a self-reinforcing loop. More borrowing leads to more spending, leads to more income, leads to ability to borrow even more. This is the expansion phase. GDP grows, unemployment falls, stock market rises, everyone feels rich. Politicians take credit for the strong economy. But here's the thing that nobody tells you, the thing that breaks the entire system. Borrowing is just pulling spending forward from your future. Think about what actually happens when you borrow money. You want to buy a $50,000 car, but you only earn $40,000 per year and you've only saved $10,000. Without credit, you can't buy that car. You have to wait, save more, maybe buy a cheaper car. But with credit, you can buy it today. The bank lends you $40,000. You now have $50,000 total. You buy the car, you feel great. But you've created a future where you have to pay back that $40,000 plus interest. Let's say $45,000 total over 5 years. That's $9,000 per year. You're still earning $40,000, but now $9,000 of that goes to debt repayment. You only have $31,000 left to spend. Before you borrowed, $40,000 income, $40,000 spending. After you borrowed $40,000 income, $31,000 spending because $9,000 goes to debt repayment. Your spending went down. And remember, your spending is someone else's income. So someone else's income just went down. They can borrow less. They spend less. Their reduced spending lowers someone else's income. The cycle reverses. Less borrowing leads to less spending, leads to less income, leads to even less ability to borrow, leads to even less spending. This is a recession. People lose jobs, asset prices fall. Everyone feels poor. Politicians blame the previous administration, so the central bank steps in. They lower interest rates. When interest rates are low, borrowing becomes cheaper. Debt payments go down. People can't afford to borrow again. Spending picks up. Incomes rise. The cycle starts over. This happens over and over, every 5 to 8 years. Expansion, recession, expansion, recession. It's been happening for centuries. It will keep happening as long as humans have access to credit. Third, the long-term debt cycle. This is the big one. This is the cycle that ruins economies, destroys currencies, starts wars, and reshapes the world order. And this is the cycle that most people, most economists, most policymakers don't even know exists. Why don't they see it? Because it takes 75 to 100 years to complete. That's longer than a human lifespan. You live through maybe one and a half long-term debt cycles in your entire life. When you're experiencing something that slowly you don't perceive it as a cycle, you experience it as just the way things are. It's like a frog in slowly boiling water. The temperature rises so gradually that the frog doesn't notice until it's too late. Here's what happens over the long-term debt cycle. After each short-term recession, the economy recovers. GDP grows again. Employment rises. Stock market rebounds. Everything seems fine. But notice something critical that almost everyone misses. Each recovery ends with more total debt than the previous cycle. Why? Human nature. Pure, simple, predictable human nature. People have a bias toward immediate gratification. They would rather borrow and spend now than save and wait. Businesses would rather borrow to grow now than reinvest profits slowly. Governments would rather borrow to fund programs now than raise taxes or cut spending. So after every recession, when interest rates are lowered and credit becomes available again, people don't just borrow back to the previous level. They borrow more. We learned our lesson last time. This time is different. We'll be more responsible. But they're not. For decades, this works fine. Better than fine, it works great. Incomes rise, not just from productivity growth, but from increasing leverage. Asset prices go up, houses, stocks, bonds, everything. The stock market has its best decades in history. Everyone feels wealthy. Young people look at their parents' generation and think they bought a house for $50,000 and now it's worth $500,000. They're geniuses. We call this a bubble, but people living through it don't call it a bubble. They call it the new economy. This time is different. Old rules don't apply anymore. I've heard these exact phrases in every bubble I've studied. 1920s stock market. We've entered a new era of permanent prosperity. 1980s Japan. Japanese land and stock valuations are justified by unique cultural factors. 1990s .com. The internet changes everything. Profits don't matter. 2000s housing real estate never goes down. They're not making any more land. Different words, same delusion. Here's the mathematical reality that destroys everything. Eventually, debt grows faster than income. Let me say that again, because this is the key to understanding every major economic crisis in history. Debt grows faster than income. In the beginning, when debt levels are low, this isn't a problem. You borrow $100,000 for a house. Your income is $50,000. Your debt-to-income ratio is 2 to 1. You pay $6,000 per year in mortgage payments, 12% of your income. Easy. A few years later, you borrow more. Home equity line of credit for $50,000. Car loan for $30,000. Credit cards at $20,000. Now your total debt is $200,000. Your income has grown to $60,000. Debt-to-income ratio is 3.3 to 1. You pay $15,000 per year in debt payments, 25% of your income, still manageable. This continues. More borrowing, more debt. Income grows, but debt grows faster. Eventually, you hit a wall. Your debt is $400,000. Your income is $75,000. Their income is $75,000. Debt-to-income ratio is 5.3 to 1. You pay $30,000 per year in debt payments, 40% of your income. You can't borrow anymore. Banks won't lend to you. You're maxed out. And that's when the music stops. This is what happened in the United States, Europe, and much of the world in 2008. It happened in Japan in 1989. It happened globally in 1929. And it's happening again right now in 2026. Let me give you the numbers that should absolutely terrify you. In the United States right now, total credit in the economy is about 50 trillion. Total actual money, physical currency plus reserves at the Federal Reserve is only about $3 trillion. Read that again. $50 trillion in credit, $3 trillion in money. That means most of what you think is money is actually just credit, digital promises to pay in the future. It's a bar tab that hasn't been settled yet. This worked fine when everyone believed the promises, but what happens when people stop believing? What happens when they try to settle the bar tab all at once? Let me walk you through exactly what happens during a deleveraging, step by step, so you can see it coming next time. Phase 1, the long-term debt peak. Debt burdens have gotten so high that people can't service them anymore. You're paying 40%, 50%, sometimes 60% of your income just to make minimum payments on your debts. You can't borrow anymore. Banks won't lend to you. Credit cards are maxed out. You've been denied for new loans. So you do the only thing you can. You start cutting spending to pay down debt. You stop going to restaurants, cancel subscriptions, delay buying a new car, put off home repairs, cut everything non-essential. But remember the iron law of the economy. Your spending is someone else's income. The restaurant you stop going to, their revenue drops, they lay off a waiter. That waiter's income falls to zero. He defaults on his debts. He cuts his spending. His spending was his landlord's income. The landlord can't make his mortgage payment. It cascades. One person's spending cut leads to another person's income cut, which leads to another spending cut, which leads to another income cut. This is the moment when people realize they're not as rich as they thought they were. Phase 2, the asset collapse. People who are desperate to pay off debts or meet margin calls start selling assets. They sell stocks. They sell real estate. They sell anything with value. But when everyone tries to sell at the same time, there are no buyers. Or more precisely, buyers demand massive discounts. Asset prices collapse. Your house that was worth $500,000 is now worth $300,000. Your stock portfolio that was $200,000 is now $80,000. Your retirement account just lost 60%. But here's the vicious part. Those assets were your collateral. Banks lent you money based on the value of your house and your stocks. Now that they're worth less, you're not creditworthy anymore. The bank calls you. Your home equity line of credit is being suspended. Your margin account needs more collateral or liquidate your positions. You're forced to sell more assets at even lower prices, which drives prices down further. Phase 3, the credit freeze. Banks start failing. Why? because all those loans they made, mortgages, car loans, business loans, credit cards, a huge percentage of borrowers can't pay them back. Those loans were assets on the bank's balance sheet. Now those assets are worthless. Depositors panic. Is my money safe? Will the bank fail? They rush to withdraw cash. Bank run. The bank doesn't have enough cash because they lent it all out. The bank fails. Other banks see this and panic. They stop lending entirely. We're not sure who's creditworthy anymore. We're not sure which other banks are going to fail. We're holding on to our cash. Credit disappears completely, instantly. Businesses that need to borrow to make payroll can't get loans. They lay off employees. Those employees default on their debts. More spending cuts, more income drops, more defaults. Phase 4, the depression. This is different from a recession. Completely, fundamentally different. In a recession, the central bank lowers interest rates and people start borrowing again. Problem solved. The cycle restarts. But in a deleveraging, interest rates are already at zero. There's nowhere left to cut. The Federal Reserve lowered rates to 0% in 2008. They're at 0% again now in 2026. And even at 0%, people don't want to borrow. They're drowning in debt. They don't want more debt. They want less debt. Businesses don't want to borrow to expand. They're laying people off and trying to survive. This is the moment when policymakers panic. This is when they make decisions that will reshape the economy for the next generation. So what do you do when you're in a deleveraging? When debt burdens are crushing the economy and interest rates are already at zero? There are only 4 ways to reduce debt burdens. 4 ways this can play out. And every deleveraging in history has used some combination of these 4 methods. Way 1, austerity, cut spending. Governments implement austerity, cut spending, reduce deficits, live within our means. It sounds responsible. It sounds prudent. It sounds like the adult thing to do. It's also economic suicide. Here's why. When the government cuts spending, government employees lose their jobs. Government contractors lose revenue. People receiving government benefits lose income. All of those people cut their spending. When they cut spending, other people's incomes fall. Those people cut their spending. It cascades. Meanwhile, businesses and households are also cutting spending to pay down debt. So you have everyone, government, businesses, households cutting spending at the same time. What happens to incomes? They collapse. They fall faster than debt is repaid. So even though people are paying down debt, the debt burden, the ratio of debt to income actually gets worse, not better. Greece tried this after 2010. They cut government spending by 20%. Their economy collapsed by 25%. Unemployment hit 28%. Youth unemployment hit 60%. Their debt to GDP ratio went up, not down. Austerity during a deleveraging is like trying to lose weight by cutting off your leg. Sure, you weigh less, but you'll probably die from blood loss. Way 2, debt defaults and restructuring. Borrowers simply can't pay. They default. They declare bankruptcy. They restructure their debts, paying back 50 cents on the dollar instead of the full amount. This eliminates debt. That's good, right? Wrong. Because those debts were someone else's assets. When you default on your mortgage, the bank loses an asset. That bank's balance sheet shrinks. The bank fails. The bank's depositors lose their money. They thought they had $100,000 in savings. Now they have nothing. Wealth disappears. Not transferred, disappeared, gone. The wealth people thought they had literally vanishes. This is what happened in the 1930s. Thousands of banks failed. People's life savings evaporated. Not stolen, vanished. The asset side of the ledger just went to zero. Defaults are deflationary and devastating. They destroy wealth faster than debt. Way 3, wealth redistribution. The government raises taxes on the wealthy and uses that money to help the poor. Sounds fair, right? Take from those who have and give to those who need. Here's what actually happens. The wealthy, who are already seeing their asset values collapse and their businesses struggle, suddenly face massive tax increases. They feel attacked. They feel punished for being successful. The poor and unemployed who are suffering feel like the wealthy aren't paying their fair share. They feel abandoned by the system. Social tensions explode. The haves resent the have-nots. The have-nots resent the haves. Political extremism rises. People look for scapegoats, immigrants, minorities, foreign countries, bankers, whatever. In the 1930s, this led to Hitler's rise in Germany, Mussolini in Italy, military expansionism in Japan. It led to World War II and 70 million deaths. I'm not being dramatic. This is historical fact. Deleverings create social chaos if not handled carefully. Way 4. Print money. The central bank creates new money. Out of thin air. Digital money. Just add zeros to a computer. This is the only inflationary option. The other three are all deflationary. They reduce spending, reduce incomes, reduce asset prices. Printing money is different. The central bank uses this new money to buy government bonds and financial assets. This does several things. First, it drives up asset prices. Stocks go up, bonds go up. People who own assets feel wealthier. Second, it allows the government to borrow at low interest rates. The government can run massive deficits, spend way more than it collects in taxes without worrying about finding buyers for its bonds because the central bank will buy them. Third, it increases the money supply. More money chasing the same amount of goods creates inflation. Prices rise. Wages rise. Incomes rise. This is the secret. If incomes are rising due to inflation, debt burdens fall even if you don't pay back any of the debt. Think about it. You owe $100,000. Your income is $50,000. Your income is $50,000. Debt to income ratio 2 to 1. Now imagine 20% inflation. Your income rises to $60,000 because wages increase with inflation, but your debt stays at $100,000. Debt to income ratio 1.667 to 1. You didn't pay back a single dollar, but your debt burden fell by 17%. This is what the United States did in the 1940s after World War II. Massive government debt. How did they reduce it? Inflation. They kept interest rates low and let inflation run. By the 1970s, debt to GDP had fallen from 120% to 30%. They inflated away the debt, but there's a danger. If you print too much money, you get hyperinflation. Weimar Germany in the 1920s, Zimbabwe in the 2000s, Venezuela in the 2010s. The currency becomes worthless. A loaf of bread costs $1 billion. Savings are wiped out. So which one works? Which path should we take? The answer is all of them. In the right balance, this is what I call a beautiful deleveraging. You need some austerity, not too much, just enough to show fiscal discipline. You need some defaults and debt restructuring, enough to clear out the truly unsustainable debts. You need some wealth redistribution, enough to prevent social collapse. And you need money printing, enough to offset the deflationary pressure of the other three. The deflationary forces, austerity, defaults, redistribution, need to balance with the inflationary force, money printing. If you get the balance right, something beautiful happens. Debts decline relative to income. Real economic growth is positive. Inflation stays under control, maybe 3% to 4%. Not the disastrous double-digit hyperinflation. People ask me, but won't printing money cause massive inflation? Not if it's offsetting falling credit. Remember, most money is actually credit. In the U.S., $50 trillion in credit versus $3 trillion in actual money. During a deleveraging, credit collapses. Maybe $50 trillion falls to $35 trillion. That's $15 trillion in reduced spending power. If the central bank prints $15 trillion in new money to replace the lost credit, total spending power stays the same. No inflation. You're just replacing credit with money. The key is the ratio. Print too little and you get deflation and depression. Print too much, and you get hyperinflation and currency collapse. Print the right amount, and you get a beautiful deleveraging. Painful, but manageable. This is what the United States did in 2008 to 2015. The Federal Reserve printed over $4 trillion. Huge amount. And inflation stayed below 2% the entire time. Why? Because they were offsetting collapsing credit. Here's the specific mechanics that make this work. Income must grow faster than debt. Let's say a country has a debt-to-income ratio of 300%. That means total debt is 3 times annual income. Let's say the interest rate on that debt is 2%. If debt is growing at 2% because of interest and income is only growing at 1%, the debt burden gets worse every year. You'll never escape. But if you print enough money to create 4% nominal income growth, say 2% real growth plus 2% inflation, now income is growing faster than debt. The debt burden falls every year. After 10 years of 4% income growth and 2% debt growth, your debt-to-income ratio falls from 300% to about 245%. Problem solved. It takes time. A beautiful deleveraging typically takes 10 to 15 years. We call it a lost decade. Growth is slow. It's not exciting, but it's sustainable and it works. So what does all this mean for you? How do you protect yourself? How do you benefit instead of becoming a victim? I'm going to give you 3 rules. 3 simple rules that if you follow them will keep you safe through every economic cycle for the rest of your life. Number 1, don't have debt rise faster than income. This applies to you personally, to businesses, and to countries. Look at your own finances right now. What's your debt-to-income ratio? If you earn $60,000 per year and have $200,000 in debt, your ratio is 3.3 to 1. Is that ratio going up or down? If it's going up, if you're accumulating debt faster than your income is growing, you're heading for a personal deleveraging. You will hit a wall. It's math, not opinion. I see this all the time. People earning $100,000 who borrow their way to a $300,000 lifestyle. For a few years, it feels great. They have the nice house, the luxury car, the vacations. They feel successful. Then the debt payments become unsustainable. They can't borrow anymore. They're forced to cut their lifestyle from $300,000 down to maybe $70,000 after debt payments. They feel like they're in poverty, even though they're earning 6 figures. Don't do this. Live below your means. Keep your debt-to-income ratio below 2 to 1, ideally below 1 to 1. If your income is growing, great. Spend some of that increase, but don't borrow future income to spend it today. Number 2, don't have income rise faster than productivity. This one is harder to see, but it's just as important. If you're getting paid more but producing the same amount, you're living on borrowed time. This happens to individuals. You get raises every year, but you're not actually more valuable to your employer. Eventually, they realize they can hire someone younger and cheaper to do your job. You're laid off. It happens to companies. Wages and benefits increase, but productivity doesn't. They become uncompetitive. A leaner competitor undercuts them. They go bankrupt. It happens to countries. Wages rise faster than productivity for decades. Manufacturing moves to lower-cost countries. The economy hollows out. This is what happened to U.S. manufacturing from 1980 to 2010. The solution is constantly increase your productivity. Learn new skills. Adopt new technologies. Find ways to produce more value per hour worked. If you're earning 5% more this year, make sure you're producing at least 5% more value. If you can't sustain the income growth with productivity growth, the income gains will eventually reverse. Number 3, do all that you can to raise your productivity. This is the most important rule because productivity is the only sustainable source of rising living standards. Not money printing, not debt, not asset bubbles, productivity. The country that innovates faster wins. The person who learns faster wins. The business that adapts faster wins. Everything else is just moving money around. Productivity actually creates new wealth. So invest in yourself. Read. Take courses. Learn to code. Learn to manage. Learn to sell. Learn to build things that people actually want. This is simple advice for you. This is simple advice for policymakers. And you might be surprised, but most people, including most policymakers, don't pay enough attention to this. They focus on the short-term debt cycle. They focus on quarterly GDP. They focus on the next election. They ignore productivity. They ignore the long-term debt cycle. And then they act shocked when the crisis arrives. Let me tell you where we are right now in 2026. We're in the late stage of a long-term debt cycle. Debt to GDP ratios in most developed countries are at or near all-time highs. The U.S. is at 130% debt to GDP. Japan is over 250%. Europe is above 100%. Interest rates have been near zero for over a decade. Central banks have printed tens of trillions of dollars. Asset prices have been inflated to extreme levels. We've had the boom. We've had the sugar high. We've had the bubble. And now the debt burdens are becoming unsustainable. Not tomorrow, not in a sudden crash, but slowly, mechanically, predictably. You're already seeing the signs. Credit card delinquencies rising, auto loan defaults increasing, commercial real estate struggling, regional banks failing. These aren't isolated problems. They're symptoms of the same disease. Too much debt, not enough income growth to service it. Most people will do exactly the wrong thing at exactly the wrong time. When the market crashes, and it will crash, they'll panic. They'll sell at the bottom. They'll lock in their losses. When the recovery comes, and it will come, after a painful deleveraging, they'll be too scared to invest. They'll miss the rebound. They'll miss the greatest buying opportunity of their lives. Don't be that person. Understand the machine. Understand the cycle. Understand that this has all happened before, many times, and it will all happen again. The names change. The technologies change. The human psychology stays exactly the same. The economy is not a mystery. It's not chaos. It's not an act of God or a random event or something beyond human understanding. It's a machine, a simple, mechanical, predictable machine with three main forces: productivity growth, short-term debt cycles, and long-term debt cycles. Most people will hear this, nod along, maybe feel like they learned something, and then go right back to their lives. They'll keep spending more than they earn. They'll keep borrowing to maintain a lifestyle they can't afford. They'll keep ignoring productivity. They'll keep chasing bubbles and panicking during crashes. And when the next crisis comes, and it will come as surely as night follows day, they'll act completely surprised. They'll say, "How could this happen? Why didn't anyone warn us? This is unprecedented." But you'll know better. You'll know it was always coming. You'll know it was always inevitable, because you understand the machine. You understand that borrowing pulls spending forward. You understand that debt eventually has to be repaid. You understand that when everyone tries to deleverage at once, credit disappears and asset prices collapse. You understand the three rules. Don't let debt rise faster than income. Don't let income rise faster than productivity. Do everything you can to raise your productivity. Those three rules will keep you safe through every boom and bust for the rest of your life. This template has worked for me for over 40 years. It helped me predict and profit from the 2008 crisis while others were being wiped out. It will help you predict and prepare for what's coming next. The question is, will you listen? Will you change your behavior? Will you prepare? Or will you be like everyone else, learning this lesson the hard way, losing money you can't afford to lose, watching your wealth evaporate and wondering why nobody warned you? I'm warning you right now. The machine is running, the cycle is turning, time is running out. You've been warned.